Auspicious greetings to all our friends from many countries and various time zones across the globe. Thank you for joining us here in our closing ceremony. My name is Cecilia Manikan from Manila, your host, and with me is my co-host, David Rooney. David?
Thank you, Cecile, and auspicious greetings from me as well. Good afternoon, everyone, Australian time. I'm David Rooney and I'm co-host of the closing ceremony with Cecile. Let me just begin by outlining the sequence of events that will unfold from now for the next hour. First of all, each of the panellists will do a recap, or moderators from the panels will do a recap of the panels, beginning with inclusivity, challenges of self with complex systems, Australian responses, modern adaptations, health and wellbeing, and compassion as practiced in Nantian communities. Then that'll be followed by a plenary discussion with Q&As, questions and answers. And after that, we'll have a brief alert about the book that will be published based on the presentations that you've seen over the last 3 days or 2.5 days. And we'll talk a little bit about next year's event as well, because this is an annual conference. And finally, before we go back to Cecile, if you do have any short, clear questions, don't be afraid to start putting those through right now, because we only have 15 minutes for Q&A, so it won't be a long session. So get those questions in early if you want to have them answered. So back to you, Cecile.
Thank you, David. So to cap our symposium, which to me has been a very enriching wisdom weekend, I would call it, may we ask now our panelists for a brief 2 to 3 minute summary of the salient points that were taken up in their panel discussion. I am happy to acknowledge the presence of our moderators and speakers from the various panels who are with us today. From the opening ceremony and the keynote dialogue, we have Emeritus Professor Louis Lancaster, Gawain Paul Davis, and Alex. For panel 1, we have Professor Mario Fernando, together with Linus Lancaster. And for panel 2, we have Venerable Zhu Wei. Panel 3, we have Meg Hart. In panel 4, we have Jane Q and Melody Chu. And for panel 5 is Emeritus Professor Suzanne Francois, with Dr. Jonathan Page. And finally, for panel 6, we have Professor Rodney Vickers of Nantian Institute. So let us now call on the representative of each panel to render a recap of their particular session. David?
Thank you, Cecile. Now, I'd like to invite Gawain Paul Davis, who is host of the opening ceremony. Now, Gawain, he is back. He just went to do the very humble task of hanging washing on the line a few minutes ago. So I'm glad to see you're back. The floor is yours, Gawain.
Thank you. And there's nothing humble about hanging out the washing. It's one of the simple pleasures of life. The opening dialogue, the theme was Never Waste a Crisis. And very beautifully, it started, I thought, as a very quiet session in the very best sense of the term. When I introduced the speakers, I said they're people, when they speak, people listen. And I think there was quiet speaking and deep listening. There were 3 key themes that came out for me. The first one is, hey, we've been here before. Great Depression, Second World War, and around the world at any time, there is a country or a community in crisis. So yes, it's us and it's now and it's very important. But we have history to learn from, and we have to understand that in a sense, we're not special. The second thing is focusing on the fundamentals, starting with your own world. We learned a lot from hearing Louis talk about walking around the neighborhood and getting to know his neighbors whom he had never met before. and what it meant about the coming together of people in a time of crisis. There was also a focus on the sense of shared humanity and some discussion about the, in some sense, madness of focusing on identity and individualism in a world which we think is one. And in particular, from a Buddhist perspective, that when we suffer together. So this sense of a shared humanity, even though we focus on our individuality. And also how we see problems is so important. We don't have a problem of poverty. We maybe have a problem of wealth, and we certainly have a problem of sharing. But the way we construe our problems determines where we look to fix them. And the last bit was a focus on individual responsibility, the importance of starting where we are here right now. We didn't talk about social and political dynamics, which I think are a very important counterpart to the more small scale and contemplative focus of this conference, but it really was, it's down to you right now, here. And that was a message, I think, that was taken into the rest of the conference. And I would very much like to thank the speakers for a wonderful session.
Thank you very much, Professor Gawain. Crisis and disruptive times indeed present opportunities for transformation, if only we accept its invitation for us to explore the highest possibility of being in the context of a humane and more compassionate shared humanity. Truly, we should never waste a crisis. Thank you. So now let us proceed, and may I now call on Professor Mario Fernando for panel 1 to present the salient aspects of their discussion. Professor Fernando, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cecilia. Auspicious greetings. We have had 4 excellent viewpoints from thinkers and practitioners on the topic of creating an inclusive society. Professor Dr. B. Scherer presented on the topic of caring for the precious human life in its full diversity, towards reading the Dharma for practices of inclusion and celebration. B particularly engaged us with examples from the scriptures, drawing our attention to understanding and respecting the distinctiveness of everyone. That was quite unique to me from B's presentation and discussions. Then Dr. Linus Lancaster presented us with the topic of hopeful monsters, fostering empathy and compassion through arts education. Linus and his team showed how through a sculptural project, they effectively draw out the hidden monsters out into the open and make them our friends. Repressed feelings can cause prolonged suffering. And this very worthwhile project to me from Linus and his team is a real life example of reducing suffering of victims and perhaps a first step in reducing the suffering of the marginalized and the oppressed. Then Leanne Smith drew our attention to engaging young people in our democracy. She engaged us with the role of human rights in particular and how we could engage youth better with democratic governments. One particular aspect really appealed to me from this presentation was on what really matters to young people and what we can do to increase their passion, participation, and satisfaction. Lastly, in our 4 presentations, Venerable Miao Guang presented her views on the topic of post-COVID-19, acculturation of humanistic Buddhism and development of the Foguang-Shan Buddhist order. What really resonated with me during her presentation is how the post-COVID-19 crisis can be an opportunity, and this was mentioned by Gawain as well, how it can be an opportunity for the strategic development of the order. So to summarize, The key learnings from the panel 1 survey response, panel discussions, and presentations were these. These really hit me. 1, shared values and social norms do not necessarily lead to inclusiveness. Shared virtue is a better path for inclusiveness. Wisdom of sameness can be used for spiritual bypassing. Wisdom is to yourself. Compassion is to share with others. Though we are each unique and we are also different, we are all connected. Wrongly individualizing karma can lead to othering and karma shaming. That we are in the same boat, and whatever happens on the boat, we are in it together. We are people playing different roles. However big or small, we each play a part in different ways. Finally, as a point of reflection from panel 1 discussions on creating an inclusive society, I leave you with this. Humanistic Buddhism can contribute towards keeping our boat afloat in our sea of suffering. We will each reach the shores of happiness and enlightenment in our own unique ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mario. Yeah, I really appreciated your point about virtue in your recap, and it's worth reminding everybody what Aristotle's definition of virtue is. It's to do the right thing in the right way, for the right reasons, at the right time, and with the right kind of outcome. So thank you very much for that. It's a great little formula for living life wisely. Now it's my pleasure to ask the very wonderful, venerable Dr. Zhu Wei to give a recap on panel 2.
Thank you, David. Summarizing an interdisciplinary panel of such at such a level is actually quite a challenge, especially for someone like me who's not gifted with words. Under the skilled facilitation of Nick Reinberger, Emeritus Professor Stephen Hill AM, Dr. Leonard Fisher OAM, Dr. Peter Hershock and I explored a vast array of macro issues. Now, as a teacher, I prefer to ask what the audience has learned rather than what the teacher tries to teach. So please allow me to summarize your survey feedback. We are grateful to you for appreciating that people should build everything with the right principles in mind. For example, we can go with the flow of current social and technological developments, but be fully aware of the traps and not lose our attention and intention, as Peter skillfully advises. While science and AI are part and parcel of our lives, we should not let them overpower our everyday interactions, but instead use them to improve ourselves. You have also added that we should think in terms of what we don't want and why we don't want. Bravo. On a related theme, you have learned to be careful of satisfying our desires because first, we will set ourselves up in an insatiable cycle, and worse, it is much harder to become awakened or cultivate virtues in this cycle. On a more proactive note, you realize that there is power in the individual. Quoting Len's, revolution does not begin from the top. And like what Stephen reminds us, you must be the change if you want to change the world. So we can be kind, compassionate, contented, caring, forgiving, and grateful. You've also found venerable masters, you are right and I am wrong, an empowering maxim in your daily interactions. A connective theme is the importance of merging individual and collective action to create the conditions for cascading compassion. The power of collective action can be demonstrated by co-creating humanistic communities through the power of the gift, such as trust, sharing, and caring. We see certain words repeatedly in your comments, such as understanding and trust. As the panelists are all educators, we love your urge for governments to refund humanities education as a meta priority, ensuring equity and agency through broad access to social understanding and ability to judge. Yes, in addition, you say that we should instill our younger generation with values and start them with small acts of kindness, such as a smile. Of course, finally, I'm grateful to you for embracing my invention of a humanistic Buddhist metaverse, where loving kindness can start from the self and extend to the entire universe, not forgetting all parts of nature, that is, both the animal and plant kingdoms, and anything else in between. Yes, we can start with our thoughts and then build our power through collective practice. So on behalf of panel 2, I would like to thank you for your very thoughtful and encouraging feedback. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venerable Zhu, for your deep, insightful summary of the salient points discussed in panel 2. And of course, the use of science and technology to master ourselves, to improve ourselves, and never to lose our intention. But I would like to call attention to the analysis that you made about the internal environment of the person and the external, and how the internal environment of thoughts and beliefs determine the outward manifestations that we experience right now. All these psychic epidemics, I really love that. Yeah. So the power of the collective, again, as a theme in panel 2 in shared humanity and community building. Thank you, Venerable Zhu. And now I would like to call on Meghart for panel 3.
Thank you. And good afternoon. And thank you again to everyone who's made this inspiring symposium possible. So many people have been involved, and it truly has been an inspiration. And I'd like to also thank my fellow panelists, that's Anna Halifoff and Tina Ng and Venerable Zhu Fang, who was our moderator. And I hope I do justice to our panel. Our topic was to explore modern Australian responses to crises. And we looked at that from a societal and a personal perspective, with not a lot of time to do that. That's a very big topic. We first of all acknowledged Australia's complex multicultural reality of First Nations people, together with British, Asian, European, African immigrants. And we acknowledge the challenges as well as the diverse perspectives and spiritual traditions that this offers us. We also recognize that Australia as a society has not yet fully embraced this rich heritage, and that many people experience intergenerational trauma, racism, and conflict as a result. Not only does Australia face crises of prejudice, inequality, climate justice, and environmental degradation, but also a crisis of empathy, the challenge of being a kinder and more equitable society. Yet we have many resources for transforming Australia into an inclusive and flourishing country for all of its citizens, including Buddhist and Indigenous wisdom. So Anna provided the historical context for Buddhism in Australia, and she gave a very vivid account of how Buddhism had arrived with Chinese miners in the middle part of the 19th century in the gold rush. And then Tina shared with us how Buddhist practices can help resolve and even transform conflict, whether that's interpersonal conflict or community conflict or legal conflict. Conflict can be transformed into more beneficial understandings. And then I drew on the wisdom of the First Nations elders who offered us the Uluru Statement from the Heart, in 2017, and whose practices, including Kanyini, which is harmony and unconditional respect for all life, Dadiri, which is deep listening, and perhaps most of all, sacred connection to country, how all of these practices show the universal wisdom innate in all traditions and can help us recognize our common humanity and our shared fate. As an elder from WA, whom I quoted, Dr. Anne Polina said, "We are all indigenous to Mother Earth. To be a human being is a great privilege and a great honor, and we have to together foster an ethics of care and love of Earth and love of nature and of country." This is similar to the lived Buddhist path of the Bodhisattva, which uses bodhicitta, the motivation and skillful means of wishing to become awakened ourselves so as to benefit others and ensure their well-being. So this is what we call leadership from the inside out. First, cultivating the potential of our own awake consciousness, our Buddha nature, to encourage and inspire others to also have a big vision of an enlightened human society. We ended our session by asking everyone to reflect on how we can draw on all these sources of truth-telling and lived wisdom and compassion to help co-create a new and kinder story, or perhaps a vision for Australia of inclusivity and harmony, ecological consciousness, and flourishing for all its citizens, and indeed for the citizens of the world. I guess you'd call that a metaverse down under. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meg. In fact, you know, you just reminded me of something that I stumbled across over the weekend. It's the word cosmopolitan. And it's made up of two Greek words. The first one is cosmos, and the second one is the polis, or the citizenry. And so, in a sense, you know, I guess this idea of us all belonging to this fundamental commonality, this fundamental source, is to actually, to live that out is actually to be a cosmopolitan person. So in a very literal way, a cosmopolitan life is to be a citizen of the universe. So,
or the metaverse, as
the metaverse, yeah.
And actually keeping that vision in mind.
Yeah.
I find it can actually reduce the anxiety and the sense of despair that we're, you know, the uncertainty we're all feeling. Because I did quote Michelle Obama, who said, you know, when they go low, we go high. And I think that's keeping that big vision, even when other people are feeling despair, or we are ourselves.
That's right. And it's not just the vision, but it's the narrative and the story. That generates, or that vision generates. So, there was, and I especially loved the statement of the heart part of your presentation. It was very inspiring.
I took the opportunity to send everyone to the website because it is truly my belief that is a document. That document is a great gift, not just to Australians, but particularly to Australians, from a people who've had an incredible crisis. And from it has come this beautiful document, the Uluru Statement from the heart to all of us, to an invitation to truth-telling and healing. So thank you.
Yes, and it's so much more powerful than just a purely rational explanation of conditions. So yeah, thank you. Okay, so in the interest of keeping to time, I think it's now time for Melanie Tew to recapitulate on panel 5.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Because I want to keep the time, so I will tell about our key summary for our panel. The topic of panel 4 is revealing Buddhist adaptation in the modern world. Since the key word of our panel is adaptation and modern, our panel moderator raised a great question to discuss. Will adaptation lead to eventually losing the tradition? Does it matter if we lost some aspect of Buddhist tradition in the modern world? I really like this question because there are so many issues that we can discuss. Now I have chosen the best answer from our panelist, Dr. Yang Lion Wang Yinsi, as our panel's key summary. He said, we should move away from the binary of modernity versus tradition and see that both are multiple and in constant flux. Tradition have always adapted to the changing circumstances for the needs of society and the world. This crucially manifests the wisdom of Buddhism. And that's it. Thank you.
Cecilia, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Melanie, for bringing up this issue of tradition versus adaptation. And of course, the experience and the necessity that we have seen in the way by which we have to adapt. Yeah, so there are some modifications, but that is in the interest of the greater needs of people. So thank you very much, Melanie. And now I will call on Emeritus Professor Suzanne Francois to give a recap of panel 5.
Thank you.
Professor Francois.
Thank you.
Suzanne.
Thank you. And auspicious greetings to everybody and to everybody who's come to all these fabulous sessions. The panel I'm summarising is panel 5, the title of which is Examining Humanist Buddhist Approaches to Health and Wellbeing. And I want to start by saying thank you, first of all, to the panelists. It was a terrific panel. And I think it was especially good that we, even though they all came with scientific kind of frameworks, we saw integrated into their work, their research, and the presentations, the emotional as well, and emotional was given valuation. Plus, there were very strong connections made through the presentations and the discussion, strong connections with humanist Buddhism as well, which was very much appreciated. So our 4 speakers were Will Tulida Douglas, Jonathan Page, Malcolm Boyce, and Kwong Chan, and they each gave us their insights and compassionate thoughts on the topic. Their topics were, I want to just give you the flavour of them, was autism and Buddhism, humanistic Buddhism and climate change. Here we are in the middle of the COP26, sharing the questions arising out of sharing health-related data, and finally, a particular form of contemplative pedagogy in medical education. Now, as I say, the topics were certainly quite varied, but each of the presenters were deeply informed by their experience and their research and their commitment, I think, to humanistic Buddhism as well as to their particular specialities. They made the case each time for wise practice and they gave us all thoughtful examples in which they reflected on their own experience. Now, whether that was in seeing, different ways of seeing from different perspectives, such as autistic empathy, or from listening, and we've heard a lot about listening in this conference. We were given examples of listening to patients who are dying, listening to young people, listening to Indigenous people, and finally, and also to all the way through to engage with Buddhist teachings, especially those to be found in humanistic Buddhism. The presenters recognised that the emotions, and we heard about sadness, valuing sadness, fear, which is arising, and that these need to be acknowledged, these emotions to be acknowledged, and that Buddhism, perhaps humanist Buddhism, has really given us a gift in finding ways to live with these quite powerful, profound emotions, particularly in this time of severe crises. So I want to endorse what others have said as well. What a timely conference this has been, and to particularly thank the participants and the presenters in the panel 5 this morning. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Suzanne. And, you know, it's a pretty sick world at the moment. You know, we have a health epidemic or pandemic. Our climate is not well. Our political systems are not well. But there was something that Jonathan said almost offhandedly in his talk. And he talked about wise hope. And I think that's something that we really ought to take account of. We can never lose hope. It's one of the unwisest things you can do is think that any situation, no matter how bad you think it is, should rob you of hope. Because if you don't have hope, then you simply don't have the energy and the vision to do anything about it. So that was a wonderful session, and Kwong, I think he really showed us something very important about the power of emotion, and I guess the motivation of emotion and of hope. But it's time now to move on to panel 6, and Rodney Vickers, I think you might be ready to give us an overview of that panel. Thanks.
Thanks, David. It's the panel 6 was put in rather than discussion about a lot of maybe the problems in the world. There's some good examples here of putting compassion into action, which was our theme. And there's a very diverse set of actions that have been recommended to us, or actually examples of things that have been put into practice. And the first, Sue talked about her work with the New South Wales Police Force in a very practical application of humanistic Buddhism, and her teaching or helping the police force to use compassion in the workplace. And she also told us how resilience and hope can be encouraged to be taken up by individuals, and I think having a real impact on the lives of those individual policemen and hopefully on the police force as a whole. Ian, in the next talk, gave us an interesting contrast between mega compassion and worldly altruism. Wasn't quite sure which was the good one, which was the bad one, or they were both good at the start. He also reminded us that compassion is felt by individuals, not by organisations. And then he went on to say some of the errors, if you like, of worldly altruism. So I finally got to that was a bad one, in terms of and examples of growthism and science fiction escapism, which I thought was a really interesting point. While in contrast, mega compassion involves all sentient beings, all places and all times, and can be applied from a religious or a non-religious perspective. So certainly a way forward in terms of applying mega compassion by all of us. Jane went on to talk about gave a very challenging talk on gender violence in Western Buddhism. That, you know, it's obviously in lots of aspects of life is very worrying. And in particular, she reminded us that actually where individuals of significant power operate, and that can be true in Western Buddhism, and as we've seen, lots of organisations within Australia and the world. And it really, when people are trusting those individuals, that trust certainly can be eroded very easily by gender violence. And she outlined a response to that and remind us about that Buddhism can give us an informed response to gender violence using a compassionate response. And we need responses both in a secular and Buddhist framework. And she went on to talk about how we can use fierce compassion to help trauma victims, and also talk about how we can heal the community that's obviously needed if we have gender violence in our communities. And then we had a very interesting talk by Nadine, who gave us her experience of putting compassionate pedagogy into practice in the teaching place, and she related her own experience of a transformation experience at high school when she had compassionate teachers. And maybe in contrast, when she first went to university, she did not find that compassion. And the key to the compassionate pedagogy is really to see teachers or for teachers to see students as persons rather than just empty vessels, if you like, that we're pouring knowledge into. And she saw, at the contrast in a lot of tertiary educations that we need a contrast to a cultural response to neoliberal things that are coming into universities. And that compassionate pedagogy is also fueled by compassionate justice. And we're not talking about sentimentality, but a clear discernment of what's happening in the classroom. And it's really about common vulnerability, if you like, breaking down the barrier between the teacher and the student, that we're all, if you like, in it together. And so the power position of the teacher must drop away. And so we need to feel, understand, to listen to the needs and feelings of the students. And so, and it's not the classroom is not a therapy session, but a series of exercises that have been taken within the class to give this compassionate pedagogy. We need to open up the creative space and allow space for spontaneous exercises. And so maybe in summary, the panel gave a very diverse section of ways that we can put things into compassion into action. And I think even though we can be very worried about what's happening in the world, and as you've outlined, David, in terms of the planet itself or the response to COVID-19, I think there's some very practical things we can do at the coalface, if you like, that actually will make a difference. And I think, to me, that was what I took from panel 6. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Vickers, and thank you for highlighting the various dynamics and dimensions of compassion as it is played out in various fields, particularly in the police force, in prison, and as well as in education. And I think I see Nantien as an exemplar, an organization that is practicing compassion within the organization itself and in the communities that we have this community of practice. And I think we need to support this development as this is what is required of society at present. So thank you very much. And I wish now to thank all the panelists for the incisive summaries of humanistic alternatives and approaches by which we can strengthen our collective links towards a compassionate, progressive, and enlightened humanity. At this juncture, in the interest of time, David will now lead us to the next part of the program. David?
Thank you, Cecile. So the next part of the program, I guess it features the Q&A session. So if you do have questions to ask, make sure you get those in the chat room as quickly as possible. But I'd like to wrap up this section or this portion of the program by inviting our panelists to share their personal views about humanistic Buddhism. And a little bit cheekily, maybe we can begin with Venerable Miao Guang and ask her, how does she define humanistic Buddhism? Are you there, Venerable?
Oh, okay. Hello, thank you very much, David. And thank you to Cecilia, and thank you to all the moderators for such amazing summaries. Actually, I was expecting to give my take on humanistic Buddhism at the end, but since I have the opportunity now, please allow me to give my take on what humanistic Buddhism is. Well, this is something which I have been pondering over as a monastic for over 2 decades. Yet the answer remains organic. It evolves every time I'm given the privilege to listen to such insightful and masterminds from all walks of life, just like at the symposium. It's been a true pleasure. I guess this falls well alongside the truth of life, that we're never the same person. And so what is humanistic Buddhism? As a Buddhist who has found home in this global community established by Fo Guangshan, I would like to offer my understanding of humanistic Buddhism by first introducing Venerable Master, my teacher, who brought me into the world of humanistic Buddhism, if that's okay. And so for those who are not familiar with Venerable Master Xing Yun, he was born in China in 1927. But from age 26 onwards, he has spent most of his time in Taiwan while establishing a global community by traveling the world. And having become ordained at age 12, he studied at traditional Buddhist monasteries that specialized in the teachings, the precepts, as well as Chan, which is the Buddhist way of life. And so he has a very comprehensive training background on the traditional rules that became the foundation of his very creative and innovative ways of propagating Buddhism today. And as all of you know, Venerable Master Xing Yun openly refers to himself as an advocate of humanistic Buddhism. It is a type of Buddhism that aims to harmonize all school thoughts and practices only to fulfill one purpose, that is, to offer unconditional support for people of all walks of life to live better and wiser. Okay. Last but not least, you may know him as the founder of the Fo Guangshan Order, as well as the Buddhist Light International Association, an international Buddhist organization that propagates Buddhism through the endeavors of culture, education, charity, and spiritual cultivation. I would like to do this so you know where his definition of humanistic Buddhism comes from. Well, in 2005, when he was asked by Dr. Charles Gao from the University of Wisconsin, what is the definition of humanistic Buddhism? He gave these following 4 points. Well, he said humanistic Buddhism is what the Buddha taught. It is for human beings. It is that which purifies, and it is something that is virtuous and beautiful. So in other words, what the Buddha taught means that only through willingness to selflessly embrace an ever-changing world, whilst not forgetting that we are all connected to one another, can we give rise to a compassionate heart that never forgets to listen, understand, and reach out to those in need of help. That's number 1. And number 2, for human beings, it means the Buddha's teachings were for humans to learn, to understand, and to put into practice, so as to fulfill the greater human interest. And number 3 means it's a reminder for us, practicing Buddhist or non-Buddhist, are we acting, speaking, and thinking in accord with the Dharma? Does this change help ourselves and others live everyday life better? And number 4, by virtuous and beautiful, the full uncovering of our Buddha nature not only allows the light of compassion and wisdom to shine within, but also to shine onto the world. So in summary, these 4 points means humanistic Buddhism is the wisdom and compassion the Buddha taught to us human beings, so we can find a purifying path towards co-creating a world of virtuous and beautiful human hearts. And in my own words, humanistic Buddhism has now become a companion in life that guides me when I'm lost, that reminds me to stay humble and kind, a companion that teaches me to unconditionally accept myself as an imperfect human being, and as well as all beings as imperfect human beings. In the process, never to discriminate and only with loving kindness. And so my take on humanistic Buddhism, as I share today, I hope that we can never forget any single person in this world, no matter what we do, no matter what faith we follow, no matter what field we come from, and always be there for others in our own way, with that better self. That is perhaps a closer way to see a self that is connected with our Buddha nature. So at the end of the day, no matter what we do, back to my analogy of the boat, right? Humanistic Buddhism reminds us to be mindful of other human beings. So we are all in this together. Just as Venerable Joey has once said, we are all brothers and sisters in joy and suffering, right? Not just suffering, but also joy, right? We can equally share these different parts of life. And so as brothers and sisters, it is up to us to decide how we take the path of life. Is it to go fast alone, right? To enrich our own lives so that we find a place for ourselves? Or is it to go far together, to remember to take care of one another on this boat so that when there's joy, everybody shares in the joy. When there's suffering, we must remember not to only focus on our joy, but to always reach out to those in suffering. And so I hope this is, you can see where I'm coming from, and I hope my take on humanistic Buddhism is something worth pondering over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Venerable Miao Guang. That was a mouthful, and I think it will take us another week to ponder on everything that you said. Yeah, so rich, right? But yeah, the take is really thinking about others, and I like that unconditional support for everyone, for all people from different walks of life, so that we can live our lives wiser and more harmony around us. Thank you very much, Venerable Miao Guang. For the other panelists, you may raise your hand if you wish to share with us your thoughts, your own personal thought on what humanistic Buddhism is all about. Maybe what we're attempting to do here is to weave a colorful tapestry of humanistic Buddhism as it is viewed, experienced, or through many cultural lenses. So let's try to do that. So is anyone raising her hand or his hand among our panelists? Would anyone like to venture into defining what humanistic Buddhism is in a nutshell, to your own understanding? Do we see raised hands? I think Venerable Miao Guang has summarized for everyone what humanistic Buddhism is all about.
I think Gowan has a question.
Gawain, yeah, okay, sure.
So this is just a very quick comment for someone who, I don't regard myself as a humanistic Buddhist. I regard myself as a Buddhist. I've come to it through, I suppose, secular Buddhist doorway, if anything. And when I think about what I'm struck by with humanistic Buddhism, is that its starting point is not the malaise of the individual, but the malaise of the society or the world. And I think that secular Buddhism gets caught up with starting with the malaise of the individual. And I think part of what helps it to do that is that it's international, but it comes from a non-Western starting point. And I think that's incredibly helpful for those of us who suffer the limitations of Western upbringing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there more panelists who would like to share their thoughts on this? Otherwise, in the interest of time, David, maybe we'll try now to address questions from the floor.
Okay, so we've got a few questions in already, and I'm going to ask one that's actually a very difficult question to begin with. And actually, Jonathan Page might be someone who can open the discussion on this. And I'm going to ask this question because I've suffered from depression and anxiety for my entire life. And this question is about that. And it comes from Ravi Kumar in India. And India is a country I just love, and I've been there many, many times and I have many friends there. And India's been doing it very tough the last couple of years with the pandemic. And Ravi says, these days I feel depression and I don't know what to do. I'm depressed because my future looks like dark. So I'm very fearful. Please suggest me venerables. So, Jonathan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. You can hear me?
Yes.
I think that's such a key question. There's so much depression, either known or unknown. People don't always know they have it. I think I had it for a long, long time, decades probably, before I became aware of it. And then you think back and, you know, I guess I was functional. But with so much apparent gloom around, I think fundamentally, except that humanistic Buddhism does have some answers, and it comes, I think, through the felt interconnection of each of us with everybody else. So that when you're depressed, you feel very isolated and alone, to the point where you may think you're of no value to the world and you want to leave the world. But I think the important thing is that you are connected, you are of great importance, you are valued, you're entitled, and you're connected to all other people. And you have a contribution to make, and that's sort of the starting point, the interconnection, I think. When you start to connect with other people, you start to feel compassion. You start to feel waves coming through the connections with other people that you can identify. I mean, they're there, but you just have not identified them. And not only with other people, but with other life. If you can go out into the forest to some other creature, such as a tree, and just sit with that tree is your brother. And so start to generate some warmth to the tree, and the tree will respond, as will other creatures, as will birds and insects and worms and other human beings. Although sometimes it's more difficult to interact with human beings when you're depressed, but you've got the other life forms, as well as the earth itself. So these are just various concepts to begin with. And let me, through the mode of Zoom, beam some compassion to you, because at this moment in time, I feel compassion for you, even though I have not met you. I feel deep compassion, and I'm sure everybody here does. So you may receive 127 packages of compassion arriving. And I think you're so courageous admitting this depression on behalf of all of us. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And Ravi, you know, it sounds to me like you're just overwhelmed with the magnitude of what's happening around you. And I know it's hard to take your mind off the big picture, but sometimes you just have to think about, well, what are the small things in my life that are worthwhile, and what are the small things in my life that I can do right now? And just focus on those. There are times when the big picture doesn't matter. The big picture is in the future. So let's focus on now and try and be present and mindful. Do any other panelists have advice for Ravi? Just speak up. I can't necessarily see everybody.
Well, if there is none, David, much as we want to continue this interesting discussion, we don't really have that much time. So we move on to the remaining parts of our program now. And may I call on Venerable Miao Huang to present future plans regarding this symposium. We're talking about moving forward. Venerable Miao Huang.
Thank you. Thank you, Cecilia. I'm sorry, it's me again. On behalf of Foguangshan Headquarters and the Foguangshan Institute of Humanistic Buddhism, I would like to express our deepest gratitude and appreciation for everyone who has made this year's symposium possible. Just to quickly give you a recap of the history of this symposium. This is the symposium that started in 2014 at the Foguangshan headquarters in Taiwan. When we first introduced the symposium, we asked the question to the founder, what do you wish to achieve? And then his only answer was, let's create an open and interactive platform for professionals and people from all walks of life to exchange their views and their ideas on humanistic Buddhism. Let them come, let them share ideas, and so that when they go home, they have something to bring home to think of before they start to maybe, again, put their experiences and achievements in life into words, taking into consideration the scope of humanistic Buddhism. And so each year at Foguangshan, starting from 2014, it has become a rather open platform for those from Taiwan, from China, Hong Kong, and maybe at the initial opportunity to just invite only a few scholars from America, Europe, and other countries. But in the following years, we're very happy to see that these interactive platforms started to evolve, where it became roundtable discussions, where we were able to hear from a diverse range of perspectives on how humanistic Buddhism can be more than just humanistic Buddhism. We've been able to see this during the symposium in the past few days. And so as a tradition, up to 2 years ago, we've been able to organize this on a biannual basis. But I think this year is especially different and unique in the fact that we are able to bring it outside of Asia and to in one way or the other come to Australia to give somehow an Australian perspective on top of an international perspective on how humanistic Buddhism is being perceived and being put into practice. I believe this is one of the most important goals for Venerable Master Xing Yun. He was a man who never received a graduation certificate. He never went to school. He never received education. He spoke only Chinese dialect, nothing close to Mandarin in general. He says he's a very limited man, but at the end, he tells all of us, let me not be a whole, but only be a part of this better picture. And that will make all the difference. So the spirit of the symposium has been brought onto a broader scope this year. And we watch this, we witness this with so much gratitude and joy. Therefore, in the future, I believe with the convenience of the technology and with a broader community that is being built as we speak, we will be able to continue to broaden our horizons on our interactions, on our sharings, and finding a common value and a common ground. So in the future years, the plans for the symposium will perhaps to be to have it held at the Foguangshan headquarters for 1 year and somewhere outside of Asia in the following year. And it will come back to Foguangshan headquarters again. I believe this is to bring the broader community back to our starting point for one thing, but at the same time to encourage the spirit of reaching out to the world so that we see humanistic Buddhism beyond the boundaries of religion, culture, and philosophy. So this is what we hope to do in the future. Once again, we would like to thank Nantian Institute. We would like to express our gratitude to Venerable Manikan for such an open vision to bring the symposium over to Australia. It's been a privilege. Australia is my home. Although I'm not there in person, but I think in the past 3 days, I've been there fully in heart and in spirit. And so it's been a true privilege. And so hopefully in the future, we'll continue to see each other, allow us to become a part of your endeavor as well. So thank you once again, and we will hope to see you in Taiwan next year. 谢谢.
Thank you very much, Venerable Miao Guang. And I have to say that it's really a privilege for Australia to be the first country outside of Taiwan to host the symposium. And And even though COVID kind of got in the way and we couldn't all see each other and talk face to face, I think it's testimony to the great spirit of all the venerables and all the support staff involved who have actually made it happen and made it into a really excellent symposium. So now it's my duty to call upon Professor Rodney Vickers again, who's Dean of Studies at Nantian Institute, to give his closing remarks.
Thank you, David. We're privileged at Nantian Institute to have hosted the 8th Symposium on Humanistic Buddhism. The previous 7 symposia were held in Fo Guangshan headquarters in Taiwan. We'd hoped to welcome you all to Wollongong for the 8th Symposium, but it was not to be so. We've been blessed with the technology to widen participation to those who may not have been able to travel to Wollongong anyway. The theme that we've all been contemplating over the last 3 days was very timely. It has been great listening to the panelists, their presentations and their wisdom in answering the questions from the participants. It reinforced to me that humanistic Buddhism can have a significant role in addressing the issues that face us as a world and a society. If you've missed any of the panels, then you can find the recordings on YouTube. If you want to learn more in a formal context, then I would encourage you to enroll in our humanistic Buddhist degrees at Nantian Institute. You can also join us in our communities of practice check-in sessions at 11 a.m. on Sunday mornings, Australian time. I hope you have all received a great deal from the symposium, as I have. We do need to thank all those who contributed to such a successful symposium. These include Venerable Master Shung Yun for establishing this international symposium on humanistic Buddhism series, Fo Guangshan Institute of Humanistic Buddhism for co-organising the symposium and its immense support over the last 2 years, Fo Guangshan and Xinghua Education Foundation for co-sponsoring the symposium, all speakers, moderators and hosts for their gifts of insights and facilitation based on their research and practice, community leaders for participating in our opening session, all the incredible hard working behind the scenes to ensure the smooth running of the symposium, from publicity, registration to delivery. A special call out to Grace Hewitt for keeping the moderators and speakers in line. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Venerable J-Wei Shi, who has been tirelessly working over the last 2 years to make this a success. We're all grateful for her organisation skills along with her patience and wisdom. Up till now, we've asked you to keep the chat free for questions. Can I please ask you to show your appreciation in the chat for the organising and the panels?
Thank you, Professor Vickers. Thank you for Nantian's gracious support. We now have to close our program, and we will need to have the closing prayer for the natural environment by Venerable Master Xing Yin. So let's play the video.
为自然生态祈愿文，慈悲伟大的佛陀，我要向你诉说内心不平的现象。我们居住的地球被摧残的生病了，自然这个大地之母，现在已经花不飘香，鸟不歌唱，云山不再含笑，流水不再清澈。你看，这里难看难放，让大地的发丝净土净化，那里废弃污染，弄脏了山川娇嫩的永爱。我们停灵的资源日益锐减，大家未来的子孙不知如何生活。慈悲伟大的佛陀， 人类的言而必须生无根，人类的坦诚此慢亦无度，即将摧毁了美丽的地球，即将瓦解了自然的生态。请你给我们柔软的手掌，抚慰世间一切的友情。请你给我们倾听的双耳，倾听自然万象的天籁。请你给我们明亮的安静，发觉天地无尽的保障。请你给我们慈悲的心意，保护地球宽裕的生态。慈悲伟大的佛陀，我们不能再让珊瑚变色，我们不能再让大地污染，我们不能再让生物恐惧，我们不能再让空气污染。我们要努力让珊瑚再现长翠壮丽，我们要努力让大地重新美丽勇敢，我们要努力让空气恢复芬芳清新，我们要努力让自然回归庄严净土。慈悲伟大的佛陀，恳请你那是我衷心的祈愿，恳请你那是我衷心的祈愿。
Well, thank you very
We
much.
can flash now the video. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, David.
Yeah. So I
Our
think
survey.
the video was medicine for the soul. And so the next, before I get to the next bit, can I also give my personal thanks to the Chung Tian Temple here in Brisbane, which is where I'm connecting to the conference today because my internet connection at home is broken, and it's a sister temple to Nantian. They're separated by 900 kilometres. Thank you very much for, everybody for everything. And it's been quite an emotional 3 days for me listening to all the presentations but particularly the discussions. And let's hope that we can all continue in dialogue with each other and with other people who haven't even attended this conference. And let's see if we can co-create a peaceful, joyful and harmonious shared humanity for the future. Thank you very much, everybody.
And so with that, we thank you again, and we bring to a close our 3-day symposium. See you again next year. This is Cecilia Manikan from Manila, saying goodbye to all of you. Stay safe and be well. Bye for now.